What if I told you that 12,000 years ago, long before the pyramids, before writing, before civilization as we know it, someone sat down with wet clay and created something that would change our understanding of human consciousness forever? In the sun-scorched hills of northern Israel, archaeologists have uncovered a tiny figurine, barely larger than your thumb, that captures a moment frozen in time. A woman crouches, and on her back sits a goose. Simple, right? But this small object is shaking the foundations of everything we thought we knew about when humans began to think symbolically, to create myths, and to imagine worlds beyond their immediate survival. This is the story of the Nahal Ein Gev II figurine, and today we are going to journey back 12 millennia to understand why this discovery is so revolutionary. Our story begins at an archaeological site called Nahal Ein Gev II, often abbreviated as NEG2 by researchers, but I will call it by its full name throughout our journey today. This site sits in northern Israel, near the Sea of Galilee, in a landscape that 12,000 years ago looked very different from today. The excavation was led by a team of 3 prominent archaeologists: Leore Grosman from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Laurent Davin, and Natalie Monroe. These researchers were not looking for this figurine specifically. Like most groundbreaking discoveries in archaeology, it came as a surprise during systematic excavation of what they knew to be a late Natufian village. The Natufian culture is crucial to understanding this find. These were the people who lived at the very edge of the Neolithic revolution, that pivotal moment when humans transitioned from mobile hunter-gatherers to settled agriculturalists. The late Natufian period represents the final phase of this culture, approximately 12,000 to 11,500 years ago. When the team uncovered this figurine, they immediately recognized they had found something extraordinary. The object measures approximately 1½ inches in length. It was crafted from local clay that had been deliberately fired, making it one of the earliest examples of ceramic technology in the region. The firing process is significant because it shows intentionality and technical knowledge. This was not an accidental hardening, but a deliberate transformation of material. The figurine depicts a scene that is remarkably clear despite its age. A woman in a crouching position with a goose perched on her back. The level of detail is stunning for such an ancient object. But perhaps most intriguing are the traces of red ochre that still cling to both the woman and the goose after 12,000 years. Ochre, a natural earth pigment, has been used by humans for ceremonial and decorative purposes for tens of thousands of years, and its presence here suggests this was no ordinary object. The location where this figurine was discovered tells us as much as the object itself. The archaeologists found it within a semicircular stone structure that contained burials and ceremonial deposits. This is not a trash heap or a casual discard. This figurine was deliberately placed in a space reserved for the dead and for ritual activities. Think about what that means. 12,000 years ago, someone created this object, painted it with precious red ochre, and then placed it in a sacred space alongside their deceased loved ones. This was an object of profound importance. Laurent Davin, one of the excavating archaeologists, made a bold statement about this discovery. Not only is this the world's earliest figurine depicting human-animal interaction, but it is also the earliest naturalistic representation of a woman found in Southwest Asia. Let those words sink in. The earliest known depiction of a woman and animal together anywhere on Earth. But the story deepens when we examine what else was found at Nahal Ein Gev II. Throughout the village site, archaeologists discovered abundant evidence of goose processing. Goose bones with butchery marks showed these birds were hunted and consumed as food. Goose feathers and bones were fashioned into decorations and ornaments. The people of this village had an intimate relationship with geese, both practical and symbolic. This brings us to the central mystery. What does this figurine represent? Leore Grosman suggests that the Nahal Ein Gev II figurine captures a transformative moment. It bridges the world of mobile hunter-gatherers and that of the first settled communities, showing how imagination and symbolic thinking began to shape human culture. The researchers propose several interpretations. This could depict a mythological scene, perhaps a creation story or a tale explaining the relationship between humans and the natural world. It might represent a ritual scene, a shamanic transformation, or a spiritual journey. The crouching woman could be a deity, an ancestor, or an everyday person experiencing something transcendent. The goose might be a spirit guide, a totem animal, or a symbol of abundance and sustenance. What makes this figurine revolutionary is not just its age, but what it tells us about the human mind 12,000 years ago. These people were not simply surviving, they were imagining, creating narratives, and expressing complex ideas through art. They were becoming us. The Nahal Ein Gev II figurine stands as a landmark in the archaeological record, but it does not stand alone. Around the world, archaeologists have uncovered numerous other figurines and artifacts from prehistoric periods that give us glimpses into the minds of our ancient ancestors. Some are older, some younger, some more elaborate, some simpler. But each adds another piece to the puzzle of human consciousness and culture. Let me take you on a journey through some of these remarkable discoveries, each one telling its own story about the people who made them and the worlds they inhabited.
The Venus of Hohle Fels. We begin our tour with perhaps the most famous prehistoric figurine ever discovered, the Venus of Hohle Fels, found in southwestern Germany. This tiny mammoth ivory carving dates back approximately 40,000 years, making it more than 3 times older than our goose woman from Israel. The Venus of Hohle Fels represents a woman with exaggerated sexual characteristics, large breasts, wide hips, and pronounced vulva. She has no head, but instead a carefully carved loop, suggesting she was worn as a pendant. This figurine emerged from the Aurignacian culture, the first modern humans to occupy Europe, and represents the earliest known example of figurative art created by Homo sapiens. What connects this ancient European figurine to our Natufian goose woman? Both represent moments when humans were expressing complex ideas about identity, fertility, and existence through 3-dimensional art. Both were small, portable, and likely precious to their owners.
The Löwenmensch, or Lion Man. Also from Germany, but even older, we have the Löwenmensch, or Lion Man, of Hohenstein-Stadel. This extraordinary sculpture, carved from mammoth ivory approximately 40,000 years ago, depicts a human figure with a lion's head. Standing nearly 12 inches tall, it represents hundreds of hours of careful work. The Lion Man is particularly relevant to our discussion because, like the Nahal Ein Gev figurine, it depicts a human-animal hybrid or interaction. This suggests that the concept of transformation, of boundaries between human and animal being permeable, is deeply ancient in human thought. Was the Lion Man a deity, a shaman in transformation, a mythological hero? We will never know for certain, but its existence tells us that symbolic thinking and storytelling were already sophisticated 40 millennia ago. The Venus of Willendorf. Perhaps no prehistoric figurine is more iconic than the Venus of Willendorf, discovered in Austria in 1908. Dating to approximately 28,000 years ago, this limestone figurine, standing just over 4 inches tall, depicts a woman with abundant proportions, detailed braids or a woven cap, and no visible face.
The Venus of Willendorf belongs to a widespread tradition of so-called Venus figurines found across Europe and Asia during the Upper Paleolithic period. These figurines, numbering in the hundreds, suggest a shared symbolic language or belief system that spread across vast distances. Like our Natufian figurine, the Venus of Willendorf was likely connected to concepts of fertility, abundance, and perhaps spiritual power.
The Thinker and the Sitting Woman of Cernavida. Moving forward in time to approximately 5,000 years ago, we find the famous sculptures from Cernavida in Romania. The Thinker and the Sitting Woman are two terracotta figurines from the Hamangia culture that seem to capture a moment of quiet contemplation. The Thinker, a male figure seated with his head resting on his hands, and the Sitting Woman, seated with similar posture, represent a different kind of human expression in clay. Unlike fertility figurines or human-animal hybrids, these seem to capture internal states, thought, meditation, perhaps sorrow or contemplation. They bridge the gap between the Natufian period and the rise of complex civilizations, showing us how ceramic art evolved to express increasingly subtle human emotions.
The Ein Ghazal statues. Jumping to Jordan, approximately 9,000 years ago, we encounter some of the most haunting prehistoric sculptures ever found, the Ein Ghazal statues. These lime plaster figures, some full-bodied and some just busts, stand up to 3 feet tall. With their enormous eyes made of bitumen, they stare across millennia with an intensity that is both beautiful and unsettling. The Ein Ghazal statues come from a pre-pottery Neolithic settlement, making them roughly contemporary with the later phases of settled life that followed the Natufian period. They represent one of the earliest attempts at life-sized human representation and suggest increasingly complex ritual practices. Some researchers believe they may represent ancestors or deities, while others suggest they could be portraits of specific individuals. Their scale and sophistication show how rapidly artistic and symbolic expression developed once humans began living in permanent settlements. The Cucuteni Trapelia figurines. From the Cucuteni Trapelia culture of Eastern Europe, dating from approximately 5,000 to 3,000 years ago, we have thousands of ceramic figurines, predominantly female forms. These figurines are notable for their elaborate painted decorations, often featuring spirals, meanders, and geometric patterns. The sheer abundance of these figurines suggests they played an important role in daily or ritual life. Some are clearly pregnant, others are seated in birthing positions, and many wear elaborate headdresses or ornaments. They provide insight into a complex Neolithic society that flourished before the rise of writing and cities, showing us that artistic expression and symbolic thought were central to community life.
The Seated Woman of Çatalhöyük. From Turkey, approximately 8,000 years ago, comes the famous Seated Woman of Çatalhöyük. This baked clay figurine depicts a large woman seated on a throne flanked by 2 leopards or lions, her arms resting on the great cats' heads. She appears to be giving birth or seated in a position of authority. The seated woman is particularly relevant to our discussion because, like the Natufian figurine, she depicts a human in relationship with animals. The leopards suggest power, danger, and the wild, while the woman's position suggests control, authority, perhaps divinity. Çatalhöyük was one of the first true cities, and this figurine may represent a mother goddess, an early example of religious iconography that would influence cultures for millennia.
The Vinča figurines. From the Vinča culture of the Balkans, dating from approximately 6,000 to 4,500 years ago, we have hundreds of terracotta figurines with remarkably sophisticated features.
Some Vinci figurines have detailed faces, elaborate hairstyles, and wear what appear to be masks. Some researchers have controversially suggested that markings on some figurines represent an early form of writing, though this remains hotly debated. What is clear is that the Vinci people had a rich symbolic culture expressed through ceramic art. Their figurines show us that by 6,000 years ago, settled agricultural communities were producing art of remarkable complexity and diversity.
The Malta barrette figurines. Finally, we return to the deep past with the Venus figurines from Malta and Barrette in Siberia, dating to approximately 23,000 years ago. These ivory and stone carvings depict women with various degrees of abstraction, from highly detailed to almost geometric representations. What is remarkable about these Siberian figurines is their location. They demonstrate that the tradition of creating female figurines in the Upper Paleolithic extended across an enormous geographic range, from Western Europe to Siberia. This suggests either a shared cultural tradition that spread across continents or an independent emergence of similar symbolic thinking in different populations. Either interpretation tells us something profound about the human mind and its need to represent itself in material form.
As we return to our tiny figurine from Nahal Ein Gev II, we can now see it in context. This crouching woman with a goose on her back is part of a vast human tradition that stretches back at least 40,000 years and spans the entire globe. From the caves of Ice Age Europe to the first settlements of the Fertile Crescent, from the steppes of Siberia to the early cities of Anatolia, humans have felt compelled to shape earth, stone, and bone into representations of themselves, their world, and their imagination. The Nahal Ein Gev figurine is unique in its specific depiction and its precise moment in time, capturing that crucial transition from mobile hunting and gathering to settled agriculture. But it is also universal in what it represents: the human need to tell stories, to imagine beyond the visible, to create meaning through art. 12,000 years ago, someone sat with wet clay, shaped a woman and a goose, fired the clay to permanence, painted it with sacred red ochre, and placed it among the dead. That person is gone. Their language is lost, their beliefs unknown. But the figurine remains, a bridge across time, reminding us that imagination and symbolic thinking are not modern inventions, but ancient inheritances that make us fundamentally human. Thank you for joining me on this journey through deep time. If you enjoyed this exploration of archaeological mysteries, please subscribe and let me know in the comments which prehistoric artifact you would like me to explore next.